Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Port St Lucie Sports Network 2020 NFL season preview. My name is John. I'm going to be your host for today's show. So basically today what we're going to do is we're going to break down each division, each team, kind of what happened with them in the offseason and what I expect from them this year. We're going to give you the division winners. We're going to give you who makes the playoffs. We're going to give you our MVP, who wins the Super Bowl, every NFL award, everything that you can win in the NFL. We're going to go over it. So before we get started, we invite you to like our social media platforms on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Again, we are the Port St Lucie Sports Network. So without further ado, let's get into it. We're going to start in the AFC East. In fourth place in the AFC East, I have the New York Jets. They don't really have any notable additions to their team from this year. They're 7-9 last year. I do expect them to be worse this year. They draft Denzel Mims out of Baylor to replace Robbie Anderson. I'm not a big fan of Adam Gase. I'm not a big fan of Sam Darnold. Le'Veon Bell seems like his best years are behind them. I have the New York Jets as the fourth place team in the AFC East. Coming in at number 3, we have the Miami Dolphins. They actually have quite a few additions from their team this year off their 5-7 or 5-11 2019 campaign. They bring in Byron Jones, Kyle Van Noy, Eric Flowers on the offensive line, Emmanuel Ogbah from the Kansas City Chiefs, Jordan Howard. They lose to COVID-19 opt-outs. They lose Alan Hearns and Albert Wilson. In their draft, they bring some power in on the offensive line, and they also draft Tua. Everyone's looking forward to seeing when Tua is going to be starting for the Dolphins. We don't know. He's not going to start week 1. We know that's going to be Ryan Fitzpatrick. I really do like Brian Flores. I think he is. The Dolphins trending in the right direction. I don't think that they're quite there yet. Maybe in a year or two, once Tua has some time under his belt, I think the Dolphins can contend in the AFC East. Coming in at number 2 in the AFC East, something we haven't said in a long time, we have the New England Patriots. They bring in Cam Newton. Obviously, they lose Tom Brady, who's going to go down as probably the greatest player in the history of the NFL. Pretty impossible to replace with. But Cam Newton's coming in, has a lot to prove on a prove-it deal, 1 year, about $1 million. Is he going to be recovered from that as injuries he had last year? Are we going to see the 2015 NFL MVP Cam Newton? Last year, the Patriots were 12-4. They lost in the wild card round to the Tennessee Titans. I do not think they're going to go 12-4 this year. I think they're going to have a worse record from that. So what are we going to see from Cam Newton? Like we said, which Cam Newton are we going to get? I think we're going to get a good one. I don't think we're going to have the 2015 version, but the Patriots and Bill Belichick are always going to contend as long as he's around. A lot of opt-outs on their defense. Donta Hightower has been their main player on defense for a while now. They were kind of the first team that really started having a lot of people opt out. It's kind of settled down for them since then. Random thing to note, they don't really have a kicker right now. And as I film this is the day before Sunday of week 1. And they don't really have a kicker. They drafted one. They cut him. They brought in Nick Folk. They cut him as well. So, we'll have to kind of see how that plays out. And last, first place in the AFC East this year, my prediction is going to be the Buffalo Bills. They bring in Stephon Diggs. They lose Lorenzo Alexander on the defense. Their 2019 record was 10-6. They lost in the wild card round to the Houston Texans. I do believe they're going to have a better record than 10-6 this year. I think they're going to go 11-5, just slightly above where they were last year. There's not a lot of star power on the Buffalo Bills, not a lot of household names, but they're a very, very good football team. They have a strong defense. They have deceivingly good weapons on offense, and they're going to go as far as Josh Allen is going to take them. So look for the Buffalo Bills to win the AFC East this year. Okay, next we're going to look at the NFC East. The NFC East. So coming in fourth place in the NFC East, we have the newly renamed Washington Football Team. No really key additions through free agency or trades in terms of players. They do bring in Ron Rivera as their new head coach. I think Ron Rivera is going to have things looking in the right direction for some years to come. I don't think that year is this year. They trade Trent Williams to the San Francisco 49ers. They cut Adrian Peterson. They do draft Chase Young. I expect really big things from Chase Young in his first year with the Washington football team. 2019, they were 3-13, pretty bad year, obviously. A lot of bad stuff came out here in the offseason about some of the culture things going on within the organization. I do expect them to be slightly better this year, but I expect a lot of the same. I don't think it's going to be a great season in Washington. Basically, the main question besides anything we've covered so far is what is Dwayne Haskins going to do? Is he going to prove to be the answer long term in Washington, or is it going to just be back to the drawing board here in a couple years? We will wait and see. Coming in third place in the NFC East, I have the New York Giants. Additions, player-wise, nothing really big of note. They do bring in Joe Judge as their new head coach, and Jason Garrett as offensive coordinator. So those are a couple guys we're going to be talking a little bit more about here shortly. They do officially lose Eli Manning to retirement. They lose Nate Solder. He opts out due to COVID concerns. Last year they were 4-12. I do think that they're going to be a little bit better than 4-12 last year. Are they going to buy into Joe Judge's old school style of coaching? He's kind of doing some wacky things that we don't really see in 2020 anymore. He's starting over practice midway through because he doesn't like their effort. He's taping tennis balls to the players' hands and the defensive backs so they can't hold. So you're either going to really get your team to buy into what you're doing or you're going to lose them quick. So I guess we'll see here as the season gets going. Howard Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley are going to respond to Jason Garrett's offense. Obviously, Jason Garrett's always had a pretty dynamic offense when he was with the Dallas Cowboys. I do like Daniel Jones quite a bit. I expect him to develop more this year from what we saw last year. So, again, I don't really think the Giants are going to be that great this year, but just keep an eye on them. I think they're going to be a team we're going to be hearing more from here in the future. In the second place, we have the Philadelphia Eagles. They bring in Darius Slay from the Detroit Lions, a very good player, one of the top cornerbacks in the NFL. They lose Jordan Howard at running back. Through the draft, they bring in Jalen Reagor, wide receiver from TCU, and Jalen Hurts, quarterback from the University of Alabama and University of Oklahoma. Last year, they were 9-7. They actually won the NFC East last year and lost in the wild card round to the Seattle Seahawks. I believe this year they're going to have pretty much the same record, right at 9-7. Can Carson Wentz get back to his preseason, or excuse me, his pre-injury form? A few years ago when they ended up winning the Super Bowl, he was looking like the MVP of the NFL before he got hurt when they were playing the Rams. Do we see Jalen Hurts at all? Do we see the Eagles try and do something like the Saints do with Taysom Hill and kind of get Jalen Hurts involved in their offense in kind of an unconventional way? My gut says that the Eagles' reign as NFC East champions is going to come to an end this year. I'm not really wowed with what they did in the offseason. And the team that I think is going to win the NFC East this year, the Dallas Cowboys, I'm a lot more impressed with what they've been doing. The Dallas Cowboys, they bring in Aldon Smith, troubled player, very good player, but troubled off the field issues here in the past. Will he finally get his head on straight? Can he play a full season without getting in trouble? If he can, he's a great pickup for the Cowboys. They do lose Byron Jones and Robert Quinn off their defense. The Cowboys have what I think was the steal of the draft in CeeDee Lamb, the wide receiver out of Oklahoma. He is a first-round pick, so it's kind of hard to say that he's a steal, but the fact that he dropped them and he's going to get plugged right into a dynamic offense with a new dynamic coach, I think you're going to see immediate returns on their investment with CeeDee Lamb. The Cowboys were 8-8 last year. I expect that number to go up, that win total number to go up by at least 2 or 3 wins. Loaded offense, like I said, and they add a potential star in CeeDee Lamb. I think we're going to see results instantly with that. You're going to pair him with Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup. That's one of the best receiving corps in the NFL, in my opinion. Dak Prescott still has a lot to prove. He's not gotten that deal that he thinks he deserves, so he's going to go out and prove to the Cowboys and Jerry Jones that he is worth that money. Breath of fresh air with Mike McCarthy. After so many years of one coach being in the same place, sometimes the players just need to hear a new voice. And I think that's what the Cowboys are going to get with Mike McCarthy. And lastly, I expect a very big season from Ezekiel Elliott. I think the offensive line for the Cowboys is always good. And with those wide receivers garnering even more and more attention this year, I think Elliott's going to be someone who really benefits from that. Okay, so next we're going to look at the AFC North. AFC North. So coming in fourth place in the AFC North, probably no surprise, but we have the Cincinnati Bengals. They don't bring in any real new notable people. They do get AJ Green back from injury. He didn't play at all last year. I don't recall. They don't really lose anybody either. They bring in Joe Burrow, obviously the number 1 overall pick, Heisman Trophy winner, national champion from LSU. Bring in wide receiver T. Higgins. They were 2-14 last year. I don't think they're going to be 2-14 this year. I don't think they're going to be much better than that, but I think they will get a little bit better. They actually have a solid list of offensive weapons for Joe Burrow. You look at Joe Mixon, AJ Green, Tyler Boyd, John Ross, T. Higgins. I think we're a few years away from them really competing for anything, but they do have a nice little foundation on offense there. Coming in third place in the AFC North, I have the Cleveland Browns. The Browns do bring in Jack Conklin and Austin Hooper, as well as Case Keenum to be the backup quarterback. Also, they bring in new head coach Kevin Stefanski from the Minnesota Vikings. They don't really lose anybody of note that I saw. They're bringing in a big offensive tackle, Jedrick Wills from Alabama. They were 6-10 in 2019 after having major hype. I believe they're going to have a similar record, maybe exactly at 6-10. You know, you look at their depth chart; they're loaded on offense in those skill positions. Can Kevin Stefanski get Baker Mayfield to that next level? So there's very little depth on their offensive line currently. A lot of opt-outs due to COVID, so we just want to keep an eye on that. And as much as I like the Browns' position players they have, until they prove otherwise, they're still the Cleveland Browns. Coming in second place, a lot of people are a little bit higher on these guys than I am, but I am going to come in at second place with the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're going to bring in Derek Watt and Eric Ebron to their offense. Also, they're getting Ben Roethlisberger back. They draft Chase Claypool, a wide receiver from Notre Dame. In 2019, they were 8-8. I believe they're going to be a couple wins above that this year with Big Ben being back full time. They're absolutely loaded on defense. I think TJ Watt is going to be in the running for Defensive Player of the Year. Big Ben is back, and we should see a much improved offense, as well as James Conner. He's back and healthy as well. Lack of quality backup quarterback can be a concern, as you saw with them last year. So if something does happen to Big Ben, I think the Steelers could take a big hit. That's why I don't have them higher or really challenging the number 1 team, the Baltimore Ravens, for the AFC North. The Ravens bring in Calais Campbell and Derek Wolfe, both at defensive end. They do lose Hayden Hurst to the Atlanta Falcons. They draft Patrick Queen, linebacker from LSU, and J.K. Dobbins, running back from Ohio State. I think the Ravens are going to regress a little bit. You know, when you're 14-2, really to replicate that the next year is very, very hard. So I don't think they're going to be that good. I don't think they're going to be that bad. I see them maybe 1 or 2 losses more than they were at last year. So look for them to be 12-4, 13-3. I really like J.K. Dobbins out of Ohio State. I know Jonathan Taylor for the Colts is getting a lot of love for the rookie running backs, but I think J.K. Dobbins is someone to really keep an eye out on. The Ravens have a very good offensive line, and obviously everyone's going to be focused on Lamar Jackson at all times to be able to run the ball. So he's not going, when he gets those opportunities in the game, I think he can take advantage of them. What is Lamar Jackson going to have in store for us in 2020? I expect big things again. We'll get into the MVP conversation later on in this video, but I expect big things from Lamar Jackson this year. Okay, so the NFC North now. My fourth place team in the NFC North is Chicago Bears. They bring in Nick Foles and Robert Quinn and Jimmy Graham. They lose Prince Amukamara, Taylor Gabriel, Leonard Floyd, Clinton Dix, and Kyle Long. They draft Cole Kmet, tight end from Notre Dame. They were 8-8 last year. I see that number dropping. I think they're going to be worse than 8-8. I really don't have any confidence in Mitchell Trubisky or Nick Foles for that matter. The defense should be good as always, but personally, I don't really have high hopes for the Bears in 2020. The Detroit Lions, I have finishing third in the NFC North. I know a lot of people nationally right now are kind of in love with the Detroit Lions, but I don't love them quite as much. They do bring in Desmond Trufant, Jamie Collins, and Danny Shelton. They just signed Adrian Peterson, and they have Matthew Stafford back, who was out with a back injury last year. They lose Damon Harrison and Darius Slay, who I mentioned earlier with the Eagles. They bring in DeAndre Swift, running back from Georgia, and Jeff Okudah, cornerback from Ohio State. I think Jeff Okudah is going to challenge for the Defensive Rookie of the Year, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. So last year, Lions were 3-12-1. I do expect that win total to go up this year. Stafford's back. He's going to provide a shot in the arm for that offense and that team in general. Now, currently, Kenny Galladay's health is a big concern. He's their number one wide receiver, so we're going to have to keep an eye on that. I like the Lions, like I said, but just not as much as some other people do right now. I think there's two teams that are clearly better than them. One of them is the Minnesota Vikings, who I have coming in at number 2 in the NFC North. They bring in Yannick Ngakoue. They draft Justin Jefferson, the wide receiver out of LSU. They do lose quite a bit of people from their team last year that went to the playoffs. They lose Stephon Diggs, Everson Griffin, Mackenzie Alexander, Linval Joseph, Xavier Rhodes, and they just lost Danielle Hunter to the IR, who's arguably the best player on the team. They were 10-6 last year. I believe that 10-win total is not going to be hit this year, but I do have them contending for that 7th playoff spot. Remember, there are 7 playoff teams from each conference this year. There's a lot of turnover from that team, so it's kind of hard to predict what's going to be happening. I think Justin Jefferson is a long-term good replacement for Stephon Diggs. As I record this about an hour ago, Dalvin Cook just signed his extension, so he's going to be happy. He's always poised for a big year. And yeah, I think the Vikings are going to have a slight drop-off this year. But the number one team I think is going to win the NFC North, and for whatever reason is not getting a lot of love nationally with football people or just people in general, is the Green Bay Packers. They bring in Christian Kirksey on defense. They lose Blake Martinez, who's been a league leader in tackles or right around the top for a while now, Brian Bulaga and Jimmy Graham. They draft Jordan Love, which their draft does concern me. I think they could have done a lot more for the team for right now. They were 13-3 last year. They bring back pretty much the same team. I think it's going to be slightly down from that 13-win total. There was it was weird last year. There's a lot of 13-win teams in the NFL. I don't really see there being that many this year. But yeah, I'm very high on the Packers. I think this is going to be the Aaron Rodgers prove-it season. He's going to show everyone that he's the man, and he's going to stay the man for as long as he wants to be. So I have the Green Bay Packers winning the NFC North. Okay, now we're going to move to the AFC South. Last place in the AFC South, I don't think is any surprise. I have the Jacksonville Jaguars. They do bring in Joe Schobert from the Cleveland Browns as well as Tyler Eifert. They lose a lot. They lose Calais Campbell, A.J. Boye, Nick Foles, and Leonard Fournette. They were 6-10 last year. I think that number is going to drop quite a bit. I do like Josh Allen, DJ Chark Jr. I think he's a very underrated wide receiver. But that's about it. Expect Jacksonville to have the number 1 overall pick in 2021. I do have a bold statement. Not only do we see Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville next year, I'm saying we see Dabo Swinney in Jacksonville as well. Coming in at 3rd place in the AFC South, after a great year last year that kind of caught some people off guard, people got on fire for them, is the Tennessee Titans. They lose Marcus Mariota, Jack Conklin on the offensive line, Jarrell Casey, and Delaney Walker. They do bring in Vic Beasley and Jadeveon Clowney just recently on the defensive side. They were 9-7 last year and lost in the AFC title game. I think they're going to be right around that win total this year, maybe 1 or 2 games below it. I think their strong finish is kind of a fluke personally. Ryan Tannehill's been around long enough. He's got to prove that what he did at the end of last year is really who he is and not the Ryan Tannehill that we've seen, in Miami. I do believe Derrick Henry and A.J. Brown will build off last season, though. I like both those players quite a bit. In 2nd place, I have the team that has somewhat dominated the division for the last 4 or 5 years. I have the Houston Texans. They bring in David Johnson and Brandon Cooks, Randall Cobb. They lose DeAndre Hopkins and Jonathan Joseph. The DeAndre Hopkins loss still baffles me how they let that happen. They were 10-6 last year. They lose in the divisional round, the Kansas City Chiefs. I think that number is going to drop one or 2 games. I don't think their team overall is good this year as they were last year, but they have a very good, very dynamic, very young quarterback in Deshaun Watson. And when you have a quarterback like that, you're always going to be in contention in pretty much every game. Obviously, on Thursday night, they had a rough go against the Chiefs. I think pretty much everyone's going to. David Johnson did look very good We have the benefit of filming this on Saturday after the game to know that, but winning the AFC South this year is a team that I think no question would have won it last year had they not had their franchise quarterback retire 2 weeks before the season start. My AFC South champions for this year are the Indianapolis Colts. They bring in Phillip Rivers, DeForest Buckner, and Xavier Rhodes. They lose Eric Ebron, and they lose Jabal Sheard. They draft Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman Jr. The Colts are regarded as having one of the best drafts from this past year. Last year, they're 7-9. They really couldn't overcome like I said, that retirement of Andrew Luck kind of at the last minute. I expect that number to go up by 3 or 4 games this year. I'm looking at the Colts to be 10-6 or 11-5. If Phillip Rivers can step up, this Colts team is poised to go on a run. This is the best defense that they've had in a long time. This is the best offensive line that Phillip Rivers has ever played behind. I expect a really big season from Darius Leonard. I don't necessarily know that I think he's going to be Defensive Player of the Year just because of the position he plays, but I think he's going to push to lead the NFL in tackles. He's going to be, obviously, if you play with those types of settings on fantasy football, he's going to be the number 1 defensive player taken. Look for a lot of potential in terms of rookie production on the offensive side. Obviously, we mentioned Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman. One thing that concerns me with the Colts, though, kicking position last year was an issue. This year, they're going with an undrafted rookie kicker who didn't kick in the preseason. So we really have no idea what to expect from him other than what he did in college, which once you get to the NFL really means nothing. So hopefully that works out for the Colts. If not, this division is going to be a lot tighter. So next we're going to go to probably the most talked about division this offseason, which is the NFC South. In the NFC South, I have in 4th place the Carolina Panthers. They bring in Teddy Bridgewater, Russell Okung, Robbie Anderson. They also bring in Matt Rule as their new head coach. They lose Cam Newton, Gerald McCoy, Greg Olsen, Eric Reed. The Panthers were 5-11 last year. I don't think they're going to meet that win total this year. I expect that one to be under. I really do like Matt Rule. I believe he's going to turn the Panthers around in time like he did at Baylor, but the key word there is in time. Besides Christian McCaffrey fantasy stats, I don't really expect much from the Carolina Panthers this year. I could be wrong, but that's just kind of where I'm sitting at right now the day before the season starts. In 3rd place, I see the Atlanta Falcons. They're going to bring in Dante Fowler, Hayden Hurst, and Todd Gurley. The Falcons lose Desmond Trufant, Devonta Freeman, Vic Beasley, and Austin Hooper, I believe they just signed to a huge deal not long ago, and now he's already off the team and on the Browns, so that's strange. Last year, the Falcons were 7-9. I believe they're going to be right around that same win total this year, give or take +1, -1. The Falcons are like a really weird team. They have a lot of first-rounders on their offense, but it seems like the name value is there, but they're not really getting that production. There's probably a reason they have so many of them. I'm interested to see if Todd Gurley can get to his old form. Ever since right before the Super Bowl when he's with the Rams, he's just never really been the same. I don't think anyone ever really knows what happened to him. He just kind of fell off a cliff essentially. So we'll see. He's back in his familiar college area now with the Falcons. So we'll see if we can get an old Todd Gurley back. Can Matt Ryan and Julio Jones keep the Falcons in the playoff hunt? Yes, but I think they're going to just slightly miss the playoffs again this year. The number 2 team I see in the NFC South is the by far most talked about team this offseason. That's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Bucs bring in Tom Brady, Gronk, Leonard Fournette, LaShawn McCoy. They lose Jameis Winston. The Bucs are 7-9 last year. I do see that win total going up. Man, Tom Brady in the Bucs uniform is just crazy to think about. But if you think about all the great quarterbacks in NFL history, Joe Montana, Peyton Manning, Johnny Unitas, Joe Namath, you'll see some of these guys at the end of their careers end up playing elsewhere. So I guess the more you think about it, it gets a little less strange, but it's still very strange to me. We'll see really how strange it looks tomorrow when they take the field. But we got to see how they gel. They have a lot less work put in right now than they would usually have. Obviously, with the craziness that's going on in the world and the preseason in the NFL getting canceled, No OTAs. The Bucks, I think, are a little bit further behind the ball than they would have been. I don't think that they're going to win the division because I think they might struggle at the beginning of the year a little bit. They have obviously potential to get hot later in the year, but I think the Kings in the NFC South are going to be the New Orleans Saints. Saints bring in Malcolm Jenkins and Emmanuel Sanders. They lose Von Bell and Eli Apple. Again, I was saying earlier, a lot of teams were 13-3 last year, it seemed like. The Saints were 13-3. I don't think they're going to get 13 wins. I think they'll be right at probably one less than that, probably 12. They're loaded on offense. Obviously, they bring in Emmanuel Sanders as well to add to that. Seems like the Alvin Kamara deal is about to get done, so that should not be a distraction for the Saints. The defensive front is always going to be strong for the Saints. The Saints are going to struggle the most with no fans in the stands. Of all the teams in the NFL, I think that's going to have the biggest effect on them is just how crazy the dome gets down there. So I think at the beginning of the year when there's no fans, I think the Saints are going to struggle the most with that. We'll see as time goes on if fans are able to go to games, and maybe that becomes a non-factor. But that's where we're at with the NFC South. So now we're on to our last directional part of the NFL. We're heading out west. We'll start in the AFC West. We're looking first at the fourth place team in the AFC West, in my opinion, this year is going to be the Las Vegas Raiders. They bring in Corey Littleton, Marcus Mariota, Jason Witten, and Carl Nassib, as well as Nelson Aguilar. They lose Carl Joseph and Darryl Worley. They do bring in Henry Ruggs, the wide receiver, in the draft. 7-9 last year. I expect that win total to drop this year. The Raiders are the latest team to relocate. They moved from Oakland, California to Las Vegas, Nevada. I am excited to check out what the stadium looks like on TV. I believe they have a Sunday night game coming up sometime in October against the Buccaneers, so I'm interested to see how that looks on Sunday Night Football. It doesn't seem like John Gruden is sold on Derek Carr. Neither am I. I thought it was kind of crazy a few years back. They paid him all that money. I believe he's the highest paid player in the NFL for a minute, just based off that one, was it 2016 season. I don't expect the Raiders' first season in Vegas to be that great of one. Third place in the AFC West, I'm looking at the Denver Broncos. The Broncos bring in Jarrell Casey, AJ Boye, Melvin Gordon. They do lose Chris Harris, Derek Wolfe, and recently they lose Von Miller to IR. They bring in Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler. Those are their notable draft picks. They're 7-9 last year. I could see him being 7-9 this year. I could see him dropping a game or two. I think the Broncos, in the future, they're going to be the second best team in the AFC West for a long time. If Von Miller was playing this year, maybe I put them at second in the division right now, but he's not, so I'm going to have them at third. They have a very good young core on offense. I think Drew Lock, franchise quarterback, potential for the Broncos. Look for him to develop the rest of the year with the additions of Melvin Gordon, Jerry Jeudy, and KJ Hamler. Second place, I had the LA Chargers. They lose Phillip Rivers, Russell Okung, Melvin Gordon. They lose Derwin James to IR, which is a big blow for them. Great young defensive back from Florida State. They're bringing in Chris Harris Jr. and Linval Joseph. They do draft Justin Herbert, quarterback out of Oregon, as well as Kenneth Murray, linebacker of Oklahoma. They're 5-11 last year. I think they're going to probably go 8-8 this year. They got that fancy new stadium they're sharing with the Rams. I don't really believe in Tyrod Taylor, but I think their offense as a whole is pretty good, and I think they're going to be a pretty run-of-the-mill team. I think their division, aside from the Chiefs, is pretty easy for them right now. I don't think Tyrod Taylor finishes the season as a starting quarterback, though. I think Justin Herbert's going to get some playing time. We also want to look at Austin Eckler. Is he a one-hit wonder? I think not. I think if they can just find a way to get him the ball, he'll be able to produce like he did last year. And lastly, in the AFC West, I don't think it comes as any surprise. I have the Kansas City Chiefs winning the AFC West. The draft, they're bringing Clyde Edwards-Helaire, which, if you watch the game on Thursday night, that's not a good sign for the rest of the NFL with how he looked. They lose Kendall Fuller and Emmanuel Ogbah on defense. Damian Williams decided to opt out. I do not think he's going to get his job back when he decides to come back. They were 12-4 last year. I think that number is going to go up this year. I think they could easily win 13 or 14 games. I don't think they're going to go undefeated. You saw the Chiefs last year, how good they were, and they went through a rough patch last year. I'm not necessarily thinking they're going to go through as rough of one this year, but I don't think they're going to go undefeated either. Yeah, reigning champs, they pretty much bring everybody back. I think we're going to see some offensive records fall this year. I have no idea what because they're so good at everything, but I think we'll see some fall. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think, is going to challenge for the best rookie running back season of all time. Patrick Mahomes isn't going anywhere anytime soon, as we saw, 10 years, like $500 million deal. So, again, rest of the NFL, not great for them, great for the Chiefs. One thing to keep an eye on, they have a lot of injuries and opt-outs, it seems like, on the defensive side right now. So there's not a lot of depth on defense right now. I think their defense is suitable at the moment. But, as injuries creep up throughout the year, it could just be something to keep an eye on. But I have the Chiefs going over 12-4 this year. And our last division we want to look at is the NFC West. Fourth place in the NFC West, I have the Los Angeles Rams. They bring in A'Shaun Robinson and Leonard Floyd. They lose Todd Gurley, Brandon Cooks, Corey Littleton, Dante Fowler, and Eric Weddle. They bring in Cam Akers, running back from Florida State, in the draft. 9-7 last year. I do not see them being 9-7 this year. I think that number is going to go down. Aaron Donald's going to be amazing as always. Jalen Ramsey got paid a lot of money. We'll have to see how that works long term. They paid a lot of people a lot of money in the Rams here in the last few years, so I'm not even positive how they were able to get that done. Yeah, Jared Goff needs to bring it this year if he wants the Rams to stay out of the cellar in the NFC West. I think the NFC West is the best division in the NFL, and I think the Rams would be not in last in a lot of other divisions, but that's just where they still happen to be. Side note, not really football related, but I think the new logo and the new uniforms for the Rams are horrible. So next, in third place, I have the Arizona Cardinals. Key additions, they bring in DeAndre Hopkins. Obviously, they lose David Johnson. They bring in Isaiah Simmons, the versatile linebacker from Clemson. The Cardinals were 5-10-1 last year. I think that number is going to go up. I believe the Cardinals are going to go 8-8 this year. I think they're going to be one of the biggest surprises in the NFL. I think they're going to challenge for that seventh. Remember, there's 7 playoff spots this year. I think they're going to challenge for that 7th spot. I don't necessarily think that they're going to get in, but I think that you're going to like what you see with the Arizona Cardinals. But like we said, they play in one of the best divisions in the NFL, so their division games are obviously going to be very hard. I think with the addition of DeAndre Hopkins, look at Kyler Murray to be a dark horse candidate to win the MVP. And also, a guy who never gets talked about much, the most underrated player in the NFL, in my opinion, is Chandler Jones. So look for him to have a great year as always. Second place, NFC West, I have the Seattle Seahawks. They bring in Greg Olsen and Quentin Dunbar. They lose Jadeveon Clowney, Ziggy Ansah, and 3/5 of their offensive line from last year. 11-5 last year in 2019. I think it's going to be slightly down. 9-7, 10-6. If Pete Carroll lets Russell Wilson do his thing, I think the Seahawks have a legitimate chance to be continuing in NFC. If they don't, I think the season is going to end much similar to it did last year. Pete Carroll just needs to get out of his own way and let Russell Wilson do what he does. They don't have a very good offensive line from last year, and they don't have much depth on it, so that is always going to be a concern for the Seattle Seahawks. Until they fix it, that's going to be something that's always going to be brought up. And lastly, winners of the NFC West last year, I believe they're going to repeat and win again this year, the San Francisco 49ers. They don't really bring in anyone of note. They do lose DeForest Buckner and Emmanuel Sanders. 13-3, like I said, a lot of 13-3 teams last year. I think that number goes slightly down. But I still expect them to win the NFC West and be a legitimate contender in the NFC. They're going to go as far as Jimmy G is going to take them. I think you'll see later with my seeding and how I think everything's going to work out, you'll see which teams have good quarterbacks and which teams don't. I think the 49ers have an okay quarterback. I don't think he's nearly as good as some of the others in the NFC. Injury concerns at wide receiver and O-line depth. They don't really have any healthy wide receivers, it seems like right now, so I'm interested to see how that goes. I know they're a run-first team, but you got to have some wide receivers, and they don't have a lot of depth at the offensive line, which middle-of-the-pack offensive line last year. They did run the ball well, but again, as the season goes on, the offensive linemen can get hurt. You're going to have to fill in for them. They don't really have a lot of depth. I think Nick Bosa is going to push for the Defensive Player of the Year award, and we'll get to that here in a moment. And can Kyle Shanahan win the big one? How many leads is this guy going to have in the Super Bowl? before he gets it done. So we want to see Kyle Shanahan win the big one. Will it happen this year? Time will tell. Okay, so that's a breakdown of each division and each team. Let's look at the seeding that I'm predicting for the AFC and the NFC. Again, 7 playoff teams this year. There's usually only 6, but there's going to be 7 this year. Okay, AFC. 7th seed, I have the Houston Texans. 6th seed, New England Patriots. 5th seed, Pittsburgh Steelers. 4th seed, Indianapolis Colts. 3 seed, the Buffalo Bills. The 2 seed, the Baltimore Ravens. And the number 1 seed in the AFC, the Kansas City Chiefs. On the NFC side, coming in at 7th, the Minnesota Vikings. The 6th seed, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The 5th seed, the Seattle Seahawks. The 4th seed, Dallas Cowboys. 3rd seed, the San Francisco 49ers. The 2 seed, the New Orleans Saints. And the number 1 seed, in my opinion, this year is going to be the Green Bay Packers. In terms of individual awards, I have Patrick Mahomes winning the MVP over Lamar Jackson. The Defensive Player of the Year, in my opinion, is going to go to Nick Bosa. I have him just edging out T.J. Watt, who I think is in line for a very good big year like he had last year. Offensive Rookie of the Year, I have Clyde Edwards-Helaire over Joe Burrow. Kind of cheated because we got to see the game on Thursday night, but that's where I'm leaning towards. Defensive Rookie of the Year, I'm looking to Chase Young of the Washington football team to win that over Jeff Okudah of the Detroit Lions. Coach of the Year, I'm going to go Andy Reid. NFL Rushing Leader, I'm going to take Ezekiel Elliott. And the NFL Receiving Leader, I'm going to take Michael Thomas. So the last thing, who is going to be in the Super Bowl? I have the Kansas City Chiefs and the New Orleans Saints in the Super Bowl this year. It's going to be Drew Brees' last season, in my opinion. He has a very good chance to get that second Super Bowl win, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think the Kansas City Chiefs are going to run it back like they're saying, win the Super Bowl in 2021. There hasn't been a repeat Super Bowl champion since the early 2000s, I believe, with the Patriots. It's obviously very hard to do. I think the Chiefs have a chance to do it. So, thank you guys very much for joining me. That is my 2020 NFL season preview. Again, comment, subscribe on all of our social media channels, on Twitter, on YouTube, and on Facebook. Be on the lookout for more content to come. We're hopefully in the next couple of days, we're going to get a daily show going where we kind of recap in the morning, 5-10 minutes, just something short. But thank you guys for listening, and we will be back soon.